Well, when I was asked to introduce Charlie, the best way I could think to do it was to read from a letter that I sent him last year when he was named one of the Lifetime Achievement Award winners for the Arkansas Historical Association. I'm the president of the association, and I will quote my excerpt and embarrass Charlie now. It is my extreme pleasure to inform you that the Board of Trustees of the Arkansas Historical Association has selected you as the recipient of its Lifetime Achievement Award in recognition of your wide and varied contributions to the study and preservation of Arkansas history. Your incomparable research and writing on early Arkansas that resulted in territorial ambition and remote and restless gave voice to a historically neglected people and continue to enlighten both students and educators. This is not to ignore your writing in a variety of other journals and your service on the editorial board of the Arkansas Historical Quarterly, your research into Cherokee removal in Arkansas, and your outstanding research on fugitive slaves for the National Park Service. And as a former student of yours, I can only concur with the letter nominating you for the award, which I quote, "He's been an educator of and inspiration for generations of students. He's an inspiration and a cheerful companion to his fellow academic historians. He sparkles, he is brilliant." Welcome, Dr. Charles Bolton.
I told Mark shortly after getting that letter that he was dangerously close to perjury. But I want to thank him, and I want to thank David, and I want to thank all of you for coming here. Particularly, I want to mention a significant part of the audience who I think made the decision to come at a New Year's Eve party that we and perhaps under the influence of alcohol, I'm not sure. But anyway, thank you all for coming here. Arkansas was a part of Missouri territory from 1803 down to 1819, when it became a separate territory. And a great deal of things happened during that period, which Arkansas historians, including me, have probably not given enough attention to. So I'll try to make that case a little bit here. The Louisiana Purchase nearly doubled the size of the United States and did so for about 2 cents an acre, which was an extremely good deal. There were not many Euro-Americans living in the territory of the Purchase at that time. Most of them were located in the lower Mississippi Valley. The territory of New Orleans, the territory of Orleans in the south, in 1803, went up to Natchez and spread down through here. Down in the south, there were some 15,000 whites, 11,000 enslaved people, and 15,000 people of color. After that, we have to go up to the St. Louis area, where most of the people were concentrated between the mouth of the Missouri River and the place where the Ohio River runs into the Mississippi. That corridor there was heavily populated during the years in which Native Americans were resident. And then St. Louis was founded in about 1864 and a French culture developed there as well. It extended just a little bit south of New Madrid, running very close to the Mississippi River. In the middle of that area was Arkansas Post, which in 1798 had about 334 white people, 56 enslaved people, and 3 people of color. The area north of New Madrid during the colonial period was basically called Upper Louisiana, or the Illinois Territory, and everything south of that was in Lower Louisiana. Arkansas Post at that time was thus part of Lower Louisiana. But in 1804, when Congress created when Congress divided the Louisiana Purchase along that line, that horizontal line, it created in the south the territory of Orleans, and north of that, in 1804, there was simply the District of Louisiana, and Arkansas then was placed in Upper Louisiana, which will make an extraordinarily important effect on the development of Arkansas during that period. Transportation would be a major factor during this period. The estimate that I've got on the right side of your screen was done by a Frenchman, I think in the 1790s. By land, from New Orleans to St. Louis, it took 35 days, more or less, and you had to travel a very circuitous route, which went northwest up to Natchitoches, which you can see there just above where the T is in territory of Orleans. From there, travelers would go up toward Arkansas Post, and at that point, there would be another very circuitous route up the White River and then the Black River, and finally, somewhere up around Spring River in northeast Arkansas, now you would cross the St. Francis River and make your way to New Madrid, and then on up the Mississippi to St. Louis. That was an extremely arduous journey. By water, at that point, the trip was much longer. The French used flat-bottomed boats called bateaux, which you had to paddle, pole, or pull up the Mississippi River, which I think flows at about 5 miles an hour going down. It took an awfully long time to do that. So Upper Louisiana was very much separated from Lower Louisiana. This map is a detail from a map of Arkansas that was published, I think, in about 1822. I want to show it here because there's several very important aspects. That black line, which I drew on there, represents what's called the Southwest Trail. The Southwest Trail, which under in the colonial period was known as the Natchitoches Trail, and at that point it ran from Cape Girardeau to the southwest, and prior to 1800, for the most part, travelers would make that sort of left-hand turn down into Louisiana. Later on, when American settlement was going on, particularly after 1810, they'd go on down toward Fulton, Arkansas, and then you could make your way into Texas from there. That area over in the right with a sort of squiggly line drawn by my somewhat uncertain hand is called, maybe you can see it there, the Great Swamp, and is, I think, the most significant and underappreciated aspect of Arkansas geography, not only in the period of we were under Missouri, but in Arkansas Territory, and really down to the Civil War. It did two things. Let's look at the earliest one. This line represents what I was talking about before, the way in which one would go from Fort Smith up to New Madrid. And throughout the period, throughout most of the period I'm talking about, New Madrid was the county seat of New Madrid County, and Arkansas was in that county. So basically, all aspects of local government were handled by a place that was a couple of hundred miles away from Arkansas Post, and took at least a couple of weeks to get to. The other aspect, and I guess I'm going to go back up here, that is extremely important for the later period, is that that great swamp basically seriously impeded land traffic from going west into Arkansas. Now, during the territorial period, much of our population in that period came out of southeast Missouri and represented Americans who had been living in or coming down through the Ohio Valley. So that access in the northeast was pretty useful. Later on, it became important for American settlers to come across into Arkansas, and that became particularly significant as Memphis became more and more important as it did in the 1830s and after. Getting from Memphis to the White River in Arkansas was an extremely difficult job because of that swampy area. Much of it, or some of it at least, would dry up in the summertime, but for much of the year, it was an extremely difficult place to travel through. The United States government devoted a very large amount of money, something like $250,000, to building a road through there. That is what most people think of as the military road. Actually, it didn't have much to do with the military. That was a way of getting the federal government to spend money on improvements throughout the United States. What was critical about that road was for immigration purposes and for getting products out of Arkansas, and that continued all the way down to the Civil War. The government almost had the road built in 1836, but Arkansas became a state in that year, and more money was needed, and Congress wouldn't, or in fact really couldn't, provide funds, because after Arkansas became a state, after any territory became a state, then there was a constitutional prohibition on the government spending money for what at that point was called internal improvements. I better get on if we're going to talk about the territory. Oh, well, one more aspect of the swamp. That semicircle encompasses the Missouri boot heel. There are a number of interpretations of why those people in what was then, well, it was old New Madrid County, why they wanted to be part of Missouri rather than Arkansas. A lot of those explanations have to do with politics. I think the Charlie Bolton interpretation is that it really had to do with geography and particularly the swamp, which made it difficult for people to come either west or south out of that area. That horizontal county at the bottom of Missouri was in 1815 created as Lawrence County, and it extended down into Arkansas. And at the time that was done, the Missouri legislature petitioned Congress for money, as they did all the time. And they justified it, saying they needed to create a county seat in this new Lawrence County. And they went on to say that they needed a county seat because it was so difficult for people to get from there to New Madrid because of what they called the marshy ground. That situation was also true on down into, well, it was certainly true in 1819 when Arkansas became a territory. And one can, in my view, forgive those people for wanting to go to St. Louis in order to do their important business, as opposed to, for example, going to Arkansas Post or even Little Rock. It was simply much easier to do the other. Okay, now, in 1804, when Congress created what was at that point the District of Louisiana, there were 5 sort of sub-districts up there: St. Charles, St. Louis, St. Genevieve, Cape Girardeau, and then New Madrid, which basically, in theory, extended all the way south to that line of 33 degrees, which is still, by the way, the present boundary of Arkansas. New Madrid extended farther west than did the population at that time. It looks like it goes out to the White River there, but people in that area were living actually east of the St. Francis River, much closer to the Mississippi River. The St. Francis River, which I don't know that many Arkansans think about much now, was really an important factor in this early period of Arkansas history. Some significant events in the period in which Arkansas was part of Louisiana Territory: the Dunbar Hunter Expedition, which explored the Washita River up to Hot Springs, probably the most significant in terms of the nation and in a sense for bragging rights in Arkansas, but it had very little to do with the settlement of Arkansas. And there weren't very many people there, and eventually, as far as I know, nobody came because of that expedition. In 1805, Louisiana, which had been a district, became a territory, which gave it a degree of self-government. 1805, the Arkansas factory was actually a government trading post at Arkansas, what was becoming known as the village of Arkansas rather than Arkansas Post. It's important in part because it represents a federal initiative to do something out there in Arkansas. 1806, the name Arkansas, for the very first time, is given, becomes an official place. That's in 1806 when the District of Arkansas was created. The following year, it was once again merged back into New Madrid, but in 1808, the District of Arkansas is recreated, and you get now more things begin to happen there. A court system begins to function, and also the Board of Commissioners dealing with Spanish claims starts to take evidence from people at Arkansas. And I'm going to talk a bit more about those claims in just a minute. In 1809, Thomas Jefferson specifically encourages a group of Cherokee Indians to migrate to Arkansas. And in fact, large numbers of them do when Arkansas becomes a territory in 1819. About 20% of its total population are, well, the white population is well, by 1820, it's around 14,000 people, white and black, the American population. Up at the Dardanelle area, there are about 5,000 Cherokees living at that point, and they're there up until the 1820s when the government pushes them out into Indian territory. And in 1811, 1812, the New Madrid earthquake occurs. As far as most of the settlers are concerned, that's simply the big issue for people in most of Arkansas, is that it just makes it harder to get from Arkansas Post to up to New Madrid. In fact, there is a guy of whom I'll say a little bit more, named Henry Cassidy, who leaves Arkansas Post about a year later. He's got some of these New Madrid claims, and he and some other people are trying to get them to St. Louis. Well, they make that route up to the St. Francis River. It's totally flooded. He can't get across. And the flooding is because the river's all choked with logs, and other changes have occurred related to the earthquake. So Cassidy finally has to go back down the St. Francis River and then back to Arkansas Post, a total of 2 weeks that he doesn't get any place. Meriwether Lewis, who you may have heard of in the Lewis and Clark expedition, became governor of Missouri in 1806 and was in that capacity until 1809 when he was returning to the east and died, I think in Kentucky, maybe Tennessee. He was either murdered or committed suicide. It's not really clear. Lewis did not have a big impact on well, actually, he was the governor of Louisiana territory. I have that wrong. He wasn't terribly interested in civil administration. He was interested in dealing with Indians and the Indian trade, getting troops, militia forces organized. But it's Lewis who does recreate the District of Arkansas in 1808, so we owe him that. Much more important is this guy, Frederick Bates, who becomes the territorial secretary of Louisiana, and then after 1812 continues in that capacity with Missouri as well. Federal territories begin in a first stage when all the officials are appointed, a governor, a secretary, and federal judges. The secretary is it's really an administrative position with a lot of responsibilities, including taking over when the governor was not in the territory. And that often happened. Frederick Bates was a capable administrator and had a more significant role, I think, with respect to the development of Arkansas, certainly than did Lewis. These Spanish land grants that I talked about before originated in 1788, when the Spanish government of Louisiana decided to encourage American immigration. For the previous several decades, they attempted to keep Americans out because Spain wanted Louisiana to be a barrier between the Americans on the east and the Spanish colony in the southwest. Americans kept coming in, however, and so in 1788, the government starts giving land grants to Americans who are able to, Americans of some prominence and wealth, who it is hoped would encourage settlement. Well, after the Louisiana Purchase, Congress passed a law saying that it would confirm all Spanish grants made prior to 1800. And that created litigation that went on for decades, most of which, though, was finished by around 1815. If you had a Spanish grant, you had to take it to this board and prove that it was legitimate and show them where it was, and that claim then could be validated. Frederick Bates actually made a trip to Arkansas Post and talked to people living there who had Spanish grants, and he played a critical role in validating some of those and, in fact, invalidating others. But ultimately, 145 claims were accepted, and that put roughly 100 square miles of land in the Arkansas Delta in the hands of people who would farm it or create what later would become plantations. This is the census for 1810, the first time that Arkansans are actually counted. They're down in the bottom two slots there. The settlement at Hopefield is across from Memphis, up in the northwestern part of the colony. And then the settlement of Arkansas, spelled that way in 1810, spelled various ways during this period. Over here on the right, you can see the total 188, 874. I think that is 1,062. Very small percentage of the roughly 21,000 people in the territory. Also, if you look at these figures, adult males in the categories between 16 and 44 are about twice as numerous as women in that same age category, which, if you think about it, may explain some of the violence that occurs during that period as men fight over women. And I think I'll just go on. That's about all we really need to know. Oh my, this is going to be very difficult, I think, for you to see. But as these cases began to be tried in the Court of Common Pleas at the village of Arkansas, a record of documents was built up over time. Those were kept. And for many years, they were located in the Arkansas History Commission without anybody really knowing about it. About 10 years ago, Lynn Foster, who works at the law school, found out about those documents and had them all transferred to the law school, where I think they are still located. And then with a grant from UALR, Lynn created an absolutely spectacular website that you can go to, and you can see each page of these documents, and they go from 1809 down into the end of, well, actually even after, into the territorial period. And there are really quite a number of them. Not only can you see the documents, but they are transcribed so that you can read the text, and they're really a valuable source. And plus, they're just fun to look at if you care about that kind of thing. The case of Clary versus Chisholm was decided in 1811. John Chisholm was an interesting person. He was an important figure among the Cherokees, although was a white man, migrated to Arkansas in about it was actually about 1810. But he was also involved in politics down in Arkansas post. The lawsuit involved a debt, and I guess you can't see this, but he owed, or Clary claimed that he owed a whole lot of money for various things. I don't know if you can read these, but there's whiskey, pork, whiskey again, gallons of whiskey, pigs, various other things. And I don't mean to suggest Chisholm was into alcohol any more than anybody else, and we don't know how many people he was taking these gallons back to up in where the Cherokees were located. But that's the kind of thing that went on in the Court of Common Pleas. That guy I mentioned before, Henry Cassidy, was also involved in an interesting case in 1812. A man named Miller, David, I think, sued Cassidy for $15,000 for slanderous words that Cassidy had bandied about among his friends in Arkansas. Among those things, Miller was a thief who had stolen a table, some books, and deeds from Henry Winter to 20,000 acres of land. Miller also, according to Cassidy, had stolen a slave. Miller called him a pretender, an imposter, and no lawyer, said he stole his license to practice. And then number 4 here is particularly significant. Cassidy claims that Cassidy was going to dig up Phoebe Miller, who was the former deceased wife of Miller, and then would throw a rope around his neck, which I assume means successfully prosecute him for murder. As a result of all of this, Miller claimed that the people in Arkansas Village would have no commerce or discourse with him. And if those things were correct, and there's some sense to that. The interesting thing about this was Cassidy was at the time a judge on that court who wasn't there when this was originally done. Miller was functioning something like the prosecuting attorney in town. So it was a very small group of people, and they didn't always get along. There is a description of the United earthquake. I think I'm going to move on quickly here because we've got to going on. These are events in Missouri Territory. Things begin to pick up after 1812, and particularly after 1815. There's a sort of boom in population after 1815. The War of 1812 is over. Settlers begin to pour into Missouri and down, less so, but into Arkansas. Population of Missouri goes from around 20,000 to 60,000 during this period. The 1,000 people in Arkansas goes up to around 14,000. Lawrence County is created, and in 1818, last Clark and Hempstead as well. William Clark becomes governor of Missouri in 1813 and serves in that office until 1820. So Arkansas was governed by two very illustrious people in that period. William Rector, however, probably had more influence on Arkansas than anybody else. Rector got the job of Surveyor General of Illinois, Missouri, and then later Arkansas Territory. He lived up in St. Louis, but he was from Tennessee, where his sister, who was married a guy named Conway, and Anne Conway had 10 children, 7 of whom were males. And William Rector, as the Surveyor General, was in control of one of the major forms of patronage of the period. And all these people, well, what he did was hire most of his male relatives, and the rest of the jobs he filled with guys he'd known in the Army during the War of 1812. Among those people is Henry Wharton Conway. He was the first Arkansas delegate to Congress, elected, I think, in 1822. A year or so later, he was killed in a duel with the Arkansas Territorial Secretary, Henry Crittenden. One of Conway's brothers was James Sevier Conway. He came to Arkansas as a surveyor, later became governor of Arkansas from 36 to 40. Elias Nelson Conway, another brother, was the governor from 52 to 60. Henry Massey Rector was the son of William's brother. He was also a governor of Arkansas. One of the most consequential figures in Arkansas history in this period was Ambrose Sevier, and he was a cousin of the Conways. So that group played a tremendously important role. During that period, the nascent Democratic Party that emerged in Arkansas was known as the Family, and pretty much accurately, this is the first local officials in Arkansas in 1814. I think we can pass over that. This is an early map based on the survey of Arkansas that began in 1815. It's a little hard maybe to understand, but that MOR up there stands for Missouri River, and then on the right, MSR, that's the Mississippi River, which forms the right side, and then it's the Arkansas River, and that's what gives it this sort of V shape where the land was first surveyed. This is a detail from the bottom portion of that map. The squiggly circle in the center is the initial survey point, which is marked with a monument in present day, well, in eastern Arkansas. The squiggly circle on the, well, let's start at the bottom. That is the mouth of the Mississippi River, and the survey involved drawing a line straight north from there, and the initial point was where it intersected a horizontal line coming from the mouth of the Arkansas River. I'm pointing, that's not doing you any good at all. That's over on the right. And finally, on the left, that is, that's Little Rock, and the line itself, as many of you probably know, is now known as Baseline Road, where it comes through Arkansas, where it comes through Little Rock. In 1817, Congress had a treaty with the Cherokee Indians and gave them, well, the deal at least involved a large part of northwestern Arkansas. which as soon as Arkansas began to fill up, as soon as Arkansas became a territory of itself, was a greatly anchored the people living there. In the 1820s, the Cherokees were moved out, and the Arkansas boundary at that left side that's the Cherokees were moved from that area in blue west of that line running from Fort Smith north to the Missouri border. And interestingly enough, basically what happens is, there is also south of that a Choctaw branch. Very few Choctaws, in fact, I don't know of any who actually settled in Arkansas. They came west later, but they were dispossessed of that land as well and put into what became Indian territory. So the western boundary of Arkansas is determined by two treaties, one with the Cherokees and one with the Choctaws. In 1816, these are the new counties that are created. Arkansas County was created in 1813, Lawrence County in 1815. At its inception, Lawrence County, as I talked about before, was part of Missouri, or at least a significant part of it. I'm going to end in just a minute so we can have at least a little period for questions. But Thomas Noble, a botanist, came into Arkansas in 1819, and his book contains this wonderful map of his travels up the Arkansas River. And these little notations along it list some of the people living there. The Pecanry settlement represents new people coming into Arkansas. Weber's place over there on near the left-hand side of the map. Weber was a important Cherokee, and you can see up there also the Cherokees located along the Arkansas River. In 1820, this is the population of Arkansas, and you can see how it was shaped by migration out of Missouri. So you've got 5,000 settlers in Lawrence County, a significant amount in Pulaski, Clark, Hempstead. That's all the Southwest Trail. Finally, Arkansas in 1820 becomes a territory. It quickly is moved into the second stage, and it elects a territorial delegate. The guy who wins, James Woodson Bates, is the brother of Frederick Bates, another carpetbagger from Missouri. Stephen F. Austin gets 342 votes in second place, and some of the people in the territory didn't know Austin was there. If they had, he might have been Arkansas's first territorial delegate, and maybe we've never had Texas, but but Austin is really important too for what I've been talking about. His father, Moses Austin, was a very wealthy Missourian who was involved in the lead mine industry up there. Austin really hadn't done a whole lot when he came through Arkansas. He was on his way into eventually looking to settle in Texas, but he was extremely well known, and I think that is what got him all those votes. Pearlie Wallace was a lawyer in Arkansas. I hope that's okay. Okay. I don't really have a conclusion, but that's that. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes.
I do have one, and I know it may take a long time to explain, but maybe you can do
Oh,
it
not
just
for me.
real briefly. I am from New Meriwether, Missouri.
Oh, good for you.
And I was quite interested when I got my little thing on your explanation on the boot heel, because it's, I don't want to say common knowledge, but we talk about it a lot, how that came to be.
Yeah.
And you said your theory was a little different, that it was based on the difficulty of that area. And southeast Missouri, where I'm from, is known as Swamp East Missouri. You know, that's what we refer to it as, Swamp East. So, but anyway, the farmland in that particular area, and my history is very lacking, but as far as dates and times, but that area around Kennett and Hayti and down in that area is quite valuable, very good farmland. So the political thing that you refer to, does it have anything to do with alcohol in the farmland?
There's a story about settlers and their political influence, and the guy who's written the most about this makes all sorts of reasons why, based on representation and various other factors, and brings up, but then discounts what I was talking about. But I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Yes, sir. We hear all about Lewis and Clark. Why don't we hear more about our surveyors who actually survey the lower part of the U.S.? You don't hear about them.
The survey that,
The baseline.
well,
Let's use the microphone.
Charlie, could you repeat the question?
yes, the question has to do with why don't we hear more about the survey that began in Arkansas, as, for example, compared to what we hear about Lewis and Clark. And I guess it has something to do with the fact that land survey is not a topic that a large group of people are interested in. In fact, they may all be gathered here. Let me just say one other thing. Oh, I don't know. I didn't say much about the Hunter Dunbar expedition, which is probably the most nationally significant thing that happened in Arkansas. The reason I don't talk about it much is because it doesn't have, I guess I said that doesn't have much to do with settlement, but it is important. Okay, I'm sorry, yeah.
From visits up in northeast Arkansas, one question I have is, why was the boundary at the St. Francis River instead of from Crowley's Ridge from about Jonesboro to Chalk Bluff?
Well, it wasn't an official boundary, but I think the key thing, the St. Francis River is east of Crowley's Ridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, that, you know, if you want to be near the river, the Mississippi, for transportation purposes, and then settlement would move west. And the problem was that getting beyond the St. Francis River was a difficult thing to do. I might say, by the way, that here I am complaining about that swamp, but that swamp also left some of the most fabulous soil in the world along the Arkansas Delta. So, you know, once it was cleared, it was very positive for Arkansas. Yeah.
Where did the word Arkansas come from?
Judge Arnold, why don't you?
Where does the word Arkansas come from? Yeah, well, I just happened to be reading about that this morning. It was an Illinois Miami word. And it was simply the name that was given to the Quapaw tribe. And I don't think it means anything. It's like Arnold. Nothing. You can read all kinds of fanciful derivations about what the word means, including people of the South wind and even more romantic fantasies. But in my humble opinion, in all humility, it means nothing. It's just a name. Sorry, but sometimes there's no story.
Let me say, if Judge Arnold doesn't know, nobody. Yes.
I was taught that the New Madrid earthquake changed the course of the Mississippi River. Is that true?
No, it still flows south. The course of the Mississippi River was constantly changing. There's a story about it flowing north just briefly. It had an enormous effect. My daughter, Honorary Bolton Valencius, has a book on the New Madrid earthquake, which, so I can't ask her to answer that question. She's not. Okay.
Time for a couple more.
Let me just take just a brief second to do something that I probably, well, anyway. That young woman against the wall is my younger daughter, Honorary Bolton. You'll probably never forgive me.
Okay. Charlie Bolton.